I'm Mike,
And I'm Amber. Welcome to the Covenant Chronicles,
where we tell you the truth about relationships.
giving you the tools to build the foundation you always needed. Welcome back to the Covenant Chronicles.
What's up?
What was that?
I don't know.
We always have some weird introduction. It's funny.
Yeah, well, I mean, I could make it all professional, but I feel like that's not fun.
Yeah, we should start having like a joke at the beginning of the podcast.
You don't want that. I'm going to say some wild stuff, and people are like, what is going on?
It might be fun.
I guess.
You never know.
I'm just saying. So, I want to lay out a scenario because it's going to lead into what we're talking about. I want to see how many people this resonates with, right? So, husband and wife, husband comes home and he takes off his stuff. Whatever introduction happens, we can get into proper greetings on a later podcast, because we've talked about that. And sometimes the greeting makes all the difference in the world. But he takes off his stuff after he gets home from work, and the wife is there, and he goes and sits on the couch or in a recliner, and maybe he puts on the football game, maybe he jumps on his phone and starts scrolling Facebook Marketplace, and now we're left in this situation where the wife is annoyed and we don't know why. And then men play the game of, well, why are you mad? What's wrong, right? Because we just came home and we haven't said anything. We haven't done anything, or so we thought. And we're trying to unwind from the crazy day we just had at work. Meanwhile, she's annoyed. And I say this because I'm sure for anyone that's been married any period of time, this can resonate to a certain extent, right? They've been through this season, are going through this season, have seen this season. And it comes down to this basic function, right, of what I want to talk about today. And that's that basically men want peace and women want connection. And this is important to understand because in this scenario, right, the woman feels justified by being annoyed at him because he came home, didn't attempt to build connection, and just went right to his own little world. He is just seeking peace, right? Which now that she's annoyed then creates an issue because, well, guess what? He doesn't have peace, right? And so it becomes this place where both parties are not getting what they want, and there's an issue, right? And you can say, well, he shouldn't have come home and done that. You can say, well, she shouldn't have got annoyed with him instead of communicating. But at the root of it, right, both are seeking something and neither is receiving that. And this concept is something that I believe is missed a lot inside of relationships. And, maybe it's not just when he comes home and this happens, right? Maybe it's they're having a disagreement about something and he just wants it to end. He doesn't want to talk anymore. He doesn't whatever, right? And she's attempting to connect to feel heard and understood. And it becomes this place where, both couples, once again, are not receiving what they want. And you see this copy and pasted throughout the relationship in so many different areas of the relationship. And what I tend to see, and I believe that you would agree with this, is when couples are in this place, right, of seeking connection and seeking peace,
Mm-hmm.
and neither is receiving what they're seeking, that's when we start seeing the, proverbial, like we love to talk about, it's not about the trash situation,
Hmm.
right? Because we talked about that before on other podcasts where, we try to explain, hey, it's not about the trash. It's about, you feel that she's annoyed at you for not taking out the trash or not cleaning something up. And really, it has nothing to do with the trash. It has to do with, you know, she wants you to step up in these areas of the relationship, and you didn't do that, and therefore, when she feels like she's cleaning up after you, like having an additional child, it creates an area of contention for her. And then that gets expressed, and then now you're drug into it and you're not receiving peace because, here we are on this hamster wheel.
That's a cycle of resentment between
Right.
each
And
other.
the cycle of resentment, exactly. And that at the core, right, is what's funny is we tend to focus on the symptom, not the cause, right?
Hmm.
And that cycle of resentment, as you said, is the symptom of this scenario,
Yeah.
right? It's not the cause of it, right? And we want to say, well, it's the, it's you know, me being on my phone, or her being annoyed, or whatever outside thing being the symptom, right? Because then what ends up happening, right, in the scenario that I gave at the beginning of this, what'll tend to happen is he'll retreat more to being on his phone or to toning her out and watching the football game, and she's going to get more annoyed and go into whatever state that she goes into, which can manifest in different ways. And like you said, it's that resentment cycle once again that is all created and stems from this basic concept of, like, she wants to connect with you and you just want peace.
Yeah.
And the really interesting thing about this is, when you connect, which is what she wants, it brings peace, which is what he wants,
Yeah.
right? You can't tell me that there's not a time where you're feeling connected and close to each other and intimate. And that doesn't necessarily mean in a sexual way, right? It certainly could, but potentially being close and intimate where you're cuddling on the couch together, and she's laid on your chest and your arm is around her, and you guys are maybe talking about something that's a little more intimate and personal, not just the what happened at work that day kind of talk, right?
Yeah.
And she's getting, in that moment, she's getting connection and he's getting peace, right? And that's just one example. I mean, this can manifest in so many different ways inside of a relationship, but this resentment cycle and trap, I will call it, that so many couples fall into is all based in the, she just wants connection and he just wants to have peace. And the symptom is neither of them are getting what they want.
So my automatic thought was like, I'm sure most women are going to be like, what does having peace mean? So, like, from a guy's perspective, what is peace to you?
What is peace to
Yeah.
me?
Or, I mean, from a guy's perspective, like, what does having peace in the relationship mean or look like?
Well, I mean, on the surface, it's the lack of fighting, the lack of nitpicking, the lack of, you know, griping or whatever, other thing you want to throw out there. But on a deeper level, it looks like, when I come home to open arms, right? I come home to knowing, like, I don't ever come home wondering what this evening is going to bring, right? I know exactly what it's going to bring. It looks like when I have had a rough day, or I don't want to say a rough day because that's a mindset thing. So when I've had a day that has had more challenges than I would have liked to have had,
Hmm.
you know, it ends up being I can come home and not in this mindset of like, okay, I have to keep fighting, I have to keep pushing, I have to, keep going, keep getting to the next thing, keep climbing. Like it's this. I guess the best way I could describe it is like when thinking of like war and going to battle, right? And you're in the battlefield and you're having to fight and you're doing all these things and you're climbing through the trenches and you're trying to climb a hill. I think of imagery much like what we see in movies of like D-Day or stuff like that, or scaling the wall and all this stuff. And that's for any men that are really, you know I guess most men would experience a level of that, but especially when you are um, trying to not, I don't know how to, you're trying to do something greater, right? And
Mhm.
that doesn't necessarily mean financially, right? I mean, just trying to minister and impact, people's lives, men's lives, trying to if God has called you to spread the gospel and like that's what you're trying to do is impact as many people's lives as possible. Maybe it is building, a financial empire, so long as, it's centered around God. Maybe it is, you know, building something within a community, whatever that is, whatever God has called you to do. When you are operating in that level, it is much like that battle, that I described on a daily basis. Like you get up, and when you achieve things is when you're in that frame and in that mindset and in that zone of like you're getting up, you're doing things, you have habits and systems that you've built within your life, but it is a grind and a battlefield every day to keep pushing, right? And so what happens is men struggle to switch that off. And the energy that you bring is the key factor there. And so that piece is when I walk in the door and now it's time to be a father, a stepfather, a husband. That is the time in which, okay, I'm shifting gears, right? Because now it's time to be present. And your energy and the peace that you bring with your softness and your femininity, right, shifts that gear and says, okay, we're going to turn this off. We're not in battle anymore. We can have a clear mind and we can just be present with our family, right? With our spouse, with our kids, all of that.
Mhm.
And, from experience, what I can say is that um, when men will say, I'm just not that person, right? Oh, I can't, blah, 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 blah. What I will say is that is 100% not true, because that was my claim to fame for many years. I can't shut my brain off, right? And I still do struggle with it sometimes, right? And that doesn't mean total shut off, but what it does mean is the mental state you're in when you're out battling all day,
Mhm.
right? Being able to turn that off is very much reliant on your partner.
Mhm.
And if 75% of the time you're tiptoeing around or you're walking on eggshells or you don't know what you're necessarily going to come home to, that switch doesn't ever get flipped, right?
Mhm.
I lived it for years. I've experienced it. I understand it. And what I will say from a guy's perspective is the men that live in that state and say, this isn't me, I can't turn this off. One, you're either single, or two, your relationship is very chaotic.
Mhm.
Because I can assure you, when it is not, you will have the ability to be present with your family. And sometimes that means getting your family involved in whatever your mission is and your calling is
Mm-hmm.
and making that part of that. But that doesn't mean that when you are physically present with your family, that you're checked out and mentally not there because of all this stuff, because you struggle to turn it off and.
Mm-hmm.
You're checking out or you're staying in that mental state because you don't want to be in the other mental state,
Mm-hmm.
which is a result of that. So hopefully that answers like what you were asking and paints a picture of like what it means to have that.
Yeah, I guess I was asking because I wanted to like know from your perspective like what that means, but I had this thought that um like women want connection, men want peace, but I was kind of thinking through what connection means in my head and what I think that it probably means for like a lot of women. And I think that connection also means peace for us, but in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we have connection or when we feel connected to you, we feel like you are present and you're listening and we are safe and um, like you and I are good and on the same page and all of those things, then we can finally turn off our brains also and not be in a state of fight or flight constantly. And we can ease into ourselves and not feel like we constantly have to worry also like, oh, are we, walking on eggshells today? Like what is it going to be like when he walks in the door? You know, like is he going to be mad that I didn't pick up the toy on the floor? Like you're not so much worried about all of those things because you know that you have this like safety and level of connection going on with your partner that is turning off that part of your brain that's like, oh no, like, is he going to be mad at me today? Is something going to be wrong? So, like, I guess my like hearing what you think of as like peace for you is also kind of in a lot of ways pretty similar for women. We just call it connection because we do need that safety aspect,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think that in a lot of ways that's what connection is for us is a level of safety inside the relationship. We we feel safe when we feel connected, which then leads to peace because we feel safe,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I mean that goes to so many different aspects of the relationship, but I guess digging deeper into like connection, like what is connection necessarily, like I think connection really just is that like I feel safe with you. I feel like I can be open with you. I feel like I I feel loved. I feel wanted, all of those things, but they all again tie back into this like when I feel connected to you, then I feel a sense of peace and not this constant worry all the time, which I think is where like a lot of this disconnection and resentment cycle comes from is just the fact that like when men don't feel peace and women don't necessarily feel peace or feel connection, um you get into this cycle, especially for women, like did I do something wrong? Is he mad at me? Like why does he not want to communicate with me, like it starts going down this rabbit hole of like, what did I do? And it does end up like manifesting into, well, he just never does these things. Why is he not doing these things? And like, which then creates just all of these different cycles to which, like, you no longer have peace. We no longer have connection. There's not this like coming together when the reality is you just both want the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
but you're not having the communication to get that. Does that make sense? I feel
Yeah.
like my brain just went down a deep rabbit hole there.
Well, yeah, I mean, the root cause of it, right, is lack of communication, which turns into all these other things, right? But that's where oftentimes in relationships, and I think we've tried to portray this in many different manners, in many different ways, in many different parts of the relationship, is that, people get so focused on the symptoms or the results of something that they fall into, like you called it, the resentment cycle, right? And really, that resentment cycle, it is really a situation in which there's something else going on, right? It's like we mentioned, it's not about the trash. I love, we should put that on a shirt, actually. It's not about the trash, bro. Great idea. Put it, there you go. A new apparel idea. Put it on the website. Um, but it's funny that we tend to fall into that, right? And then we get so caught up in our emotions and our feelings. The emotions and feelings, it's funny because like when you look at it in stages, right? The base level, most things can be solved with good communication, right? She's seeking the connection. He wants peace as like part of their core, what they need in a relationship. Well, when they don't have those things, then you turn into, the next layer, right? It's like peeling back layers on an onion. Well, then the next layer is the symptoms that occur, right?
Hmm.
Which are your disconnection, lack of peace, right? Which are then manifested in these other actions, right? Which then puts you into a place where your emotions are heightened because of said symptoms and results. And then we circle back around where then it feeds the thing, right? Because you now created resentment. And because that resentment, now we circle back to the beginning in which, well, now we're still having an issue. And now we're creating, because of the resentment, there's more disconnection and there's more lack of peace.
Yeah.
And then it just amplifies, right? And you get caught in that cycle and it becomes such this big issue. And everybody wants to focus on that last little part, right? Of basically the results that have occurred
Hmm.
until they get smart enough to self-identify, well, I resent my partner. And at that time, usually that's the point in which she exits left, right?
Yeah.
And either has an affair or divorces you, one of the two. And realistically, now, let's be honest, that usually occurs years after the checkout because normally she'll hit the checkout stage, and once she's checked out of the relationship, like you got a couple years before she has a drastic, something.
Yeah.
And then that's usually because guys aren't the brightest, then that's the catalyst that wakes us up, right? It's not anything that's occurred for years and years and years prior.
Yeah.
But the reality is, right, is if people can just take a step back and say, okay, this is the result, her being annoyed, and whatever his, the doom scrolling or whatever, or watching the game, is the result, right? That's been amplified. And we take a step back and we say, okay, what is it about this that I struggle with? Why do I come home and just want to sit on the couch and doom scroll or watch the football game?
Yeah.
And then she actually steps back and says, well, what is the truth behind why do I have these emotions and feelings when he does this?
Well, I think that's the biggest problem is like so many relationships struggle because of the communication piece, but I think that that comes from a lack of understanding and, like stuff that's happened in your past and you feel like you can't communicate because they're not going to understand and blah blah blah, right? But the problem is that if you don't ever start somewhere to fix the communication, then there is going to be no communication, which then leads into these cycles. And it's just this like continuous loop of the same thing all the time. But if you can get to a point where you understand what you're feeling and he can understand what he's feeling, and you can actually have a conversation about the fact that, like, hey, I'm feeling disconnected from you, and maybe even understand like why you're feeling disconnected,
Mhm,
not just like, oh, I'm feeling disconnected, but like, hey, we really haven't had time together lately, and I miss you. I miss time with you.
mhm,
And that's making me feel a certain way, which then leads me to see you in a certain way because, I feel like, oh, well, you come home and you sit on the couch and you're just wasting time when you could be spending time with me.
mhm.
And I miss you and I just want to spend time with you, you
Right.
know? But like those conversations aren't really had. It's just this like layer of like, well, I feel like he's just ignoring me and he's just going to sit on the couch and do nothing. And he just always does nothing. And like, and down the
Mhm,
rabbit hole you go without ever figuring out what the actual problem is. And then I think the same is probably true for guys. Like, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but, like, you in that cycle, the guy is gonna come home and be like, "God, why is she so mad at me when I just walked in the door and I just wanna sit for a minute and, just look at my phone," and, like, then it becomes this whole downward spiral of, like, "Oh, she's just so, whatever," and, like, creating these negative self talk in which we've talked about before, like the way that you talk about your spouse in your head, which does then create resentment, right?
mhm,
Because you're just constantly saying these negative things about your spouse in your head. So I think if people could understand that at like the basic level, they need to work on their communication and how they speak to each other, and that it would solve so many problems, but then also both the male and female have to be open to understanding and listening to what is being said, right?
mhm,
Because if I come to you and I say, "Hey, I'm feeling, disconnected because I feel like, we haven't had time together and I just miss you." And then in return, you were like, "Okay, I'm busy." That's just gonna that would just spark the disconnection even more, which would, make it so that she wouldn't wanna be open anymore about how she's actually feeling, right? So it
mhm.
becomes a place where you both have to work on how you're listening and communicating at the same time.
Which I think would be a great segue into doing actually the mindset podcast, revisiting that we tried to do, but
We
we
tried to do one. It just
yeah. I was wore the heck out, and I was falling asleep while we were doing it. And
yeah.
when Amber was actually editing it the next day, she's like, "Yeah, we I don't know how I feel about this," and so hence the reason we didn't drop one this last Friday.
Yeah.
That's my fault. But anyways, well, that is one thing that too is, part of that, I believe, and, part of the peace side of things is the way in which you communicate with me. You know, there was a point in which I realized that I basically, where I was like, okay, I'm going to marry this woman. And I see it regularly still, which is actually pretty awesome. And I get this reminder, and it has a lot to do with the way you communicate with me, but it's not just verbal communication. It is this like unwritten, unconditional love, right? And you don't just say it, but you actually follow through with your actions. And I believe part of what men struggle with, right? Now, let me give this caveat in the sense that there is a level of in which a man that isn't operating in his true frame, who doesn't know who he is at his core, will go out and make decisions and choices that continue to lead to turmoil.
Mm-hmm.
However, one thing that men struggle with, whether they're in that position or not, and whether they are struggling with their identity or not, is when they are in a committed relationship, there is a time period in which they are trying to, even if they're know who they are for the most part, where they're maybe struggling to actually concrete things and know that this is who I am, and it doesn't matter if I mess up, because at the end of the day, I know who I am. I know what my intentions are, right? And, and there's occasionally the split second in which we actually worry about, what if we let our partner down, or what if we fail, or what if we make a decision that affects them in a negative manner,
Mm-hmm.
right? And part of bringing that peace is this knowing that if a mistake is made, I don't have to worry about something like, I don't have to worry about, okay, I'm already going to have repercussions from whatever this is, whatever this mistake is. Now I have to worry about repercussions from you,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's not a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is multiple facets to this dynamic in which you talk about bringing the peace. And like you said, when it goes back to communication at its core and not following into this resentment trap, or the resentment cycle, right? From a guy's perspective, part of that is when we can go focus on what we need to focus on, and we don't have to worry about what's coming at home. It does create a more clear place for us to operate from, because we don't have to worry about, okay, what if this decision that I'm making right now affects us at home?
Mm-hmm.
And to give some context to this, it's not just, hey, what if I make this business decision and it affects us financially, and I have to worry about how it affects my wife, right? It could literally be, hey, throughout the day, I'm going to take this opportunity, and this could be a huge opportunity, and I'm going to go take care of this, but there's potential for my day to run 15 minutes over, and I don't want to have to deal with you when I come home because you're going to be upset that I came home 15 minutes late. So I'm not going to take this opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Or there's various other ways that this manifests, right? But what it really comes down to is like part of that um peace is just in the sense of knowing that like your ultimate goal is connection, right? And when you talk about communication in this manner, right, this is a better way to map this out, is the sense that your ultimate goal is connection.
Mm-hmm.
If I know that and I understand that, and I know that you're seeking connection because you've shown it in your actions and because you've communicated it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everything else is noise. And so, therefore, what I know is that all of this other stuff that we get so wrapped up in, like I said, like going out, we're going to war. Well, what if we make a wrong decision? Or what if we do this? Or what if, what if, what if, what if, what if? Well, none of that really affects our connection if I don't allow it to,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because at the end of the day, you're like, hey, we'll figure it out if we need to, but I just want to be close to you.
Mm-hmm.
So if it does end up affecting me, okay, well, I'll just have an opportunity to be close to you. We'll figure it out together.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's where understanding that dynamic totally changes things, in the sense of I'm not worried about going through a daily walk and worrying about what if you disapprove of something?
Mm-hmm.
What if you get mad at me for something? What if you, right? What if, I don't know, what if you yell at me for something? Like, these crazy thoughts that I think most men deal with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where they tend to actually live in a place that's not their true authentic self, their identity, because they're so worried about all these things.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so when you talk about peace and communication and how the communication keeps people out of the resentment cycle, like that is part of it, right? Because there's no quicker way for a man to resent his woman than if he feels like he can't walk in his identity because he's afraid of her being upset.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what if I like something, right? That's a big one. What if I actually do like this? What if I do this, right? What if I do that? What if I can't go to this place and interact in a business sense because she's going to get mad at me for, whatever it is, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so communicating from your end and expressing like, hey, my core desire with you is just connection.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So then I know, and here's the funny part, right? You want to know the key to your spouse? It's those two things. She wants connection, he wants peace. So I know that no matter what happens in our relationship, if you are struggling, it's not because of some outside influence.
Mm-hmm.
It's not because of money. It's not because somebody did something or said something crazy to you. It's not because of the world attacking or just the world just coming down on your shoulders. I know that if you're struggling, it's because you're not feeling connected to me. And the funny part about that is that even with things that are outside of our realm or our control that may influence you when I'm not even there and make you feel any sort of emotions or anxiety or whatever have you,
Mm-hmm.
you know what the solution is? Connection
Yeah.
between us, right? Because then it brings you the calm and like you said, the peace that you're seeking.
Mm-hmm.
And then the same thing on my side, right?
Mhm.
Because at the end of the day, the only time I really have turmoil or I feel like internal turmoil or any sort of like anxiety or anything, it's always revolved around some major decision that I haven't communicated because I'm worried about, well, what about her reaction?
Mhm.
Right? But then when I do communicate or it does come out and the way that you react isn't what I expect, well, now there's the peace,
Mhm.
right? And it's this give and take polarity of you maintaining connection with me as well as, or I guess it should be me maintaining connection with you and you maintaining peace for me. And it's like this constant flow back and forth and polarity between us that really like just anchors our relationship.
Yeah, and I think that's what it is and what most people are searching for, to be honest. Because, like, you talk about, like, oh, well, outside influences, like, making you feel a certain way or whatever. Like, yeah, there's times that, like, I get anxiety from something, but, the quickest way for me to feel better is when you come home and I feel connected to you. Like, instantly feel better
Mm-hmm.
and feel calm and, like, I don't need to be anxious and upset about whatever the stupid thing was that made me anxious and upset.
Mm-hmm.
But it's because we have that dynamic with each other, and that doesn't mean that we don't get off sometimes, and there's not some sense of disconnection, but that's it, like you said, what I'm searching for, and we talk about it, and then we figure it out every
Mm-hmm.
single time.
Well, and that's exactly it, right? And that's why I said, like, when I think through things, like at the base of it for me is, and realizing like, oh, I'm going to marry this woman, and then basically maintaining this mindset and then continuing to be reminded regularly. It is literally just that, is like, you bring me peace,
Mhm.
right? And you continue to calm, like, your presence. It's not that you necessarily even do anything, but when I'm on level 100, and I'm trying to handle life and take care of things for us and for our family, and your presence just kind of gives me that gentle reminder of like, hey, it's okay to breathe, right?
Mhm.
It's like the best way to put it is like that. Actually, talking about imagery, it's Ryan White in that post I shared with you that was sent to me by one of our friends, and I reshared it, and then some of our other close friends liked it, but I sent it specifically to you to see it, and it was talking about the purpose of Sabbath and why God made Sabbath, right? And it was never this like, you have to not do anything or, you're a sinner, right?
Mhm.
It's not what it was about, right? It was about taking rest and reminding us of what's important and being able to have a day of rest to remind us what's important, to bring us back to a grounding and a place of peacefulness, right?
Mhm.
And not be so influenced by all this worldly stuff, right? And so Ryan White had done an amazing write up on which, I tend to enjoy a lot of his content, but he did this amazing write up on coming out of Egypt and, when Israel was led out of Egypt and how, as slaves, it was this 7 days a week nonstop work, right?
Yeah.
And then they had to be reminded of like, hey, no, this isn't how you live, right? and it's so funny because we talk about freedom, right? We talk about like America is one of the most free countries, but what's funny is how low we are on the scale of like when you actually do look up statistics on the happiest countries. And part of that, I believe, is that in many other places, they actually do take a day or two to step back and just enjoy things, right? Enjoy nature, enjoy creation, enjoy whatever it is that brings joy to your life, right? And when, God had this part of his rules, right, were, if you will, or the laws or the Torah or whatever name that you know them by, right,
Hmm.
was to take the Sabbath. And it's so interesting because when Ryan White did that write up, it was all about, when they were slaves in Egypt, it was 7 days a week of hard work, nonstop, sun up to sundown type work, right? And then there was this reminder when they were led out of Egypt of like, hey, you need to take a day because now you've been programmed this way. You need to take a day, you need to take a step back and remember what's important. Take a day to just come back to peace, come back to grounding, and be remind yourself of who you are,
Hmm.
right? And who it is that lives within you. And relationships are very much the same way in the sense that like that is why, like when I say, hey, this is my wife, and I'm regularly reminded of how I came to that decision and why I made such a great decision in being like, this is who my wife's going to be. It has to do with that and bringing me back, right? Because, like, to be completely honest, like, if it weren't for you, I probably would operate on level 100 nonstop, right?
Yeah.
Like 24/7. Like we've had those nights, where I'm
Yeah.
sitting here in my brain and just, I end up on my phone or I pull out my, planner and I'm writing stuff down, or I pull out a notebook and I'm writing, or pull out the Bible and I read, or a book and I read, and like whatever this is, and it's 12 o'clock, 12:30, and like I should be in bed, the alarm's gonna go off at 4:30, and I turn my light back on the nightstand and start doing whatever, and you're just like, what are you doing? You
Yeah.
know, like go to bed, basically. Like, and like and then you tend to like if that is the case, right? You'll tend to just basically have this way that you like bring me back down. And that's what it comes down to, right? So like when men want peace, like that's what it is, right? And when you have that energy and you have that ability to do that and to bring that, that's the polarity of like, okay, that is my Sabbath, right? Within our relationship.
Hmm.
It is bringing me back to the day of rest to say, okay, I need to be grounded. I need to have peace and calmness within me so I can reconnect with my identity and what it is I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and all those sort of things. So I don't get lost in the sauce, right? And just kind of end up in this like spiral and end up in a place that I don't know how I got there, right?
Yeah.
And inversely, right? Part of that, if we take it back to biblical, part of that is about the connection with him that he created for the Sabbath, right?
Yeah.
It's that connection and that intimacy with our Father, right?
Yeah.
And so with that, this dynamic in the relationship is very much the same way in the sense of you seeking connection,
Hmm.
right? And that peace brings me back to a place, and then we can connect. And then it's the cycle of like, well, because I have peace, I create connections. And because you have connections, you create peace. And then it becomes a different cycle,
Yeah.
right? And a place in which, because we do operate in this area and this is our normal state of being, when we do fall out of that, it's not a spiral that we're trying to figure out and years later figure out how to get off of, right?
Yeah.
It's, hey, we've had a few days where it seems like we're starting to shift to a direction we don't like. Okay, let's hit the rewind button. Let's bring this back and get us back into the, and it usually stems with you expressing and communicating that you need connection, me finding a way to connect with you, whether that's time, whether it's just close, intimate time, whether it is, sex, whether it is us, doing some activity together, whether it's, cuddles on the couch, whether it's, just holding you for a little bit and maybe, in bed and we're just talking about whatever comes up, right?
Yeah.
Whatever it is, something to build connection, which then allows you to recharge your battery, which then brings peace, which then allows me to recharge my battery. And it's this perpetual where, we're like those old school radios that everybody had where it was like a radio and a flashlight all in one. You had the little thing and that popped out the side and you'd crank it and you could power it up, and like that's basically what we're doing is cranking the little thing and putting juice back in the batteries.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good place to kind of segue to what people should do this
Same thing
week.
we've been telling them to go do. Go do the relationship audit. thecovenantchronicles.com. It is free. It doesn't require a name. It doesn't require an email. It requires you to go to the website. Once again, thecovenantchronicles.com. Go to the top. If you're on the computer, it's on the right. It says relationship audit. The page is maroon and it's in white. You can't miss it. It's one of the biggest texts at the top of the page. If you're on your phone or a tablet or something of that nature, there's the little 2 or 3 bars, lines, whatever you want to call them, on the left-hand side at the top. That's your little menu icon. You click that, the menu pops out, and at the bottom of that menu, in once again the bigger text, it is the font is physically larger than everything else there. It says relationship audit. Can't stress that enough. You click on it, whichever way you did it, it pops up a link. It pops up in a whole new screen basically of a PDF, right? Like it's not even this, oh, well, you got to go down the rabbit hole to get no, it just pops up the PDF. All you got to do is print it.
Yeah. And go do that. It will create some connection in your relationship. So start there at least.
Definitely. On that note, since there is apparel on that website, definitely think we should create the It's Not the Trash Bro t-shirt.
Listen, if you want It's Not the Trash t-shirt, I will make one just for you.
All right, let's do it. And I'm gonna start handing them out to all the men whenever they're talking about oh, my wife is nagging me. I didn't take out the trash.
Maybe we should just make stickers so they can like slap it on a water bottle or on their phone or on their computer. And this is just a reminder. It's not the trash.
That's a good idea, actually.
Yeah.
All right, I guess we're gonna look into that. Y'all go do the relationship on it. We're gonna look into It's Not the Trash Bro stickers.
All right, guys. We'll talk to you later.
Okay, bye.
Bye.